You're listening to Daughter Father Dan's podcast. Hi, Daddy.
I approve.
That's not proof to me they exist. That's just proof that you believe they exist.
Prayer, first of all, it's easy. Secondly, it's effective.
The God you love so much made me this way.
Hey, listen.
That's my
believe
point.
is what you believe.
I know, but okay, so what I'm saying is...
Amen.
Oh, gosh. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Thank you for hanging in there with us on last week's very divisive topic. It's never a comfortable one to discuss, yet, as I feel about most uncomfortable issues, I think we need to talk about it more so we can better understand where we're all coming from. I know I sound like a broken record, but it is the premise and the hope of this podcast to demonstrate by way of me and my dad the ways we can in fact converse with people who don't share our same views. Dad and I learn from each other, and though we're not using these episodes as teaching tools per se, I hope you too can come away with pieces of these conversations that can in turn help conversations that you might find difficult, or give you the nudge to actually have them. And before we begin, I do hope you check out humanlibrary.org to see what they too are doing to help bridge the many divides of our human experience. As I've mentioned, humanlibrary.org is unlike a traditional library. Instead of checking out books, you check out open book humans. That's right. Instead of reading about a particular subject, you check out a human and learn from them. Humanlibrary.org's intent is to provide a space to, as they say, unjudge someone. As you'll hear in today's episode, I have my own issues with judging others, and I'm grateful for the reminder that humanlibrary.org provides in helping to change such judgment. On that note, let's go hang out with my dad.
Wow, immigration. Okay, immigration, growing up, never entered my mind. Immigration as a teenager never entered my mind. Immigration as my time in the United States Navy never entered my mind. Immigration never entered my mind when you were born or the children were born. Immigration started...
Okay, just to preface this next spot, and so you don't think Dad is uneducated, he knows that U.S. immigration began when our forefathers came to establish the United States as a nation, the first migration of immigrants, if you will. What we are referring to here in this episode is the issue of immigration as a divisive topic that has been highly politicized.
It started politically, I guess, about people coming to this country illegally. Well, the legal process is how your ancestors came to this country. Your mother's side and your father's side came through either Ellis Island or Philadelphia from Ireland and immigrated to the United States. Well, the immigration history shows that coming to America was a wonderful dream because of its prosperity, its opportunities, its freedom. Well, some of them didn't get all that when they came. They got hostility, opposition, anger, resentment, prejudice, and they dealt with it the best they could. Immigration, actually, I believe, is a gift that the United States gives to the world because of our founding fathers' Constitution and Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. Those right there set the framework for the good and the bad that has happened with immigration. So my first thought is to realize that immigration is actually a gift that the United States has given to the world.
I love that.
Now, we have a process that we have to go through, which if you compare immigration rules and regulations and laws that other countries have, you will see that the United States is more charitable, more friendly, more accepting than most of the other countries' immigration laws. What's going on in our country now, because of political pressure, special interests, the economy, and I'm sure a few other things that I can't think of, have influenced the policies on immigration. And I'm not an expert on it. I'm just a Joe Six-Pack in the pew. I know from what I've read, what I've researched, that's the best thing I could say to start this conversation off is we, the United States of America, have given the world a great gift to allow them to come into our country the way it was established by rules, laws, statutes, things you can and cannot do, what's required of you.
These moments when Dad is compelled to list things often reminds me of Christopher Guest's character Harlan Pepper in Best in Show, when while driving his truck he names just about every nut imaginable. Pine nut, cashew nut, peanut, macadamia nut.
As you know, we watched my best friend Danny Webster's wife, Christine, become an American citizen. She came here from Austria.
Mm-hmm.
We were at her swearing in and receiving American citizenship program and celebration. That was when you were, I think all you kids were born, and we were privileged to have someone that we know go through that process. And it was beautiful. Your mother even was brought to tears by what was said about accepting the rules and regulations of becoming an American citizen. So that is another plus.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good part about immigration.
When I think of immigration, it just makes sense, like, duh, do it legally. What about the refugees? How do we accept the refugee onslaught? Because as you said, America's the best place to come. Everybody's trying to get here because of their own oppressed countries or, just opportunity. But when you look at the refugees coming in, how do we deal with that as a country? Because that's an issue.
Well, what comes to mind immediately, and this has actually been used in a political arena by the Catholic Church. Mary and Joseph were refugees.
Mm-hmm.
They fled into Egypt to escape the slaughter of the innocents that Herod wanted to kill all the new and 2- and 3-year-old children in Israel because that was a threat to his kingdom. So if you look about Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus fleeing into Egypt to escape persecution, that really hits home. You got to think, this family escaped the country that they lived in and loved and were born in to go to a foreign country, to leave everything that they actually had worked, built, and saved and accumulated, leave it behind except for what you could carry on the back of a jackass. Well, that is a heartfelt immigration story. But what I think the Catholic Church has done, they have used that heartwarming event in our Lord's life as an excuse to have open borders, to let anybody and everybody come so that we fulfill the gospel message of, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Well, boy, that's hard to really fight. I mean, you can't fight against that if you are a kind person or a person of goodwill. You want to help the refugees. Well, because of the church's stance on immigration, they are willing to bypass the legal process just to be a welcoming community. Well, okay, that's a good thought, and that's a nice thought. And I'm sure that's been done throughout the ages without any of us really know what's going on, especially to our neighbors to the south, Mexico, and further south to all the Central American countries.
Dad, again in Harlan Pepper fashion, goes on to name nearly all the South and Central American countries. We'll just keep things moving right along.
The immigration process that we are experiencing now, that I think is the root of it, is that these people coming to America to escape
tyranny
fear
and oppression
but the blame lies on the countries themselves not the people who are fleeing the countries.
Well, sure.
When you got a country like Mexico, the local authorities, the local governments, there's corruption upon corruption. They don't take care of their own. And people want to come to America because America has always, or I shouldn't say always, but has learned a process of how to take care of its own. So they're coming here for that they're not getting in their own country. The blame goes to all these people in these other countries who are not charitable or thoughtful enough to take care of their own. It's like they're
okay, but
corrupt.
Dad, that's not the people's fault. Like they're trying, just like Mary and Joseph and Jesus fled that persecution, the people are attempting to do the same thing. Where are they going to go? But to a country that actually embraces them.
Okay, here's what they do. They stay in their own country and fight for their rights, like the American people have done in their history.
Okay, but
they don't flee. The United States didn't flee.
Example you gave of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, they didn't stay and try to help Herod become a kind, loving human. I don't understand.
Janae, that's an exception. That's not the norm. The people that did not escape Herod's anger were put to the sword, killed.
Exactly.
Well, that was a situation that happened overnight. There was nobody prepared for that. We in the Americas, we know what a democracy representation, we have a really good idea about what that means. These other countries are not looking to us for the rule of law, a constitution. Most of these countries don't have a constitution. These people don't have shit to fall back on for any rights. That doesn't mean you get the hell out and come to America that does take care of its own, because you're really not its own until you do it legally by the immigration process.
Okay, but Dad...
But the problem lies in foreign countries not providing for their own.
Okay, I concur on that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have people fleeing and trying to escape death and murder and rape and pillage. But it's interesting that a government or a country, the United States, can invade countries and demand that they turn to democracy, but they can't accept the people that are trying to flee from the very thing we're starting wars to go over and change. It makes no sense.
When did the United States invade another country?
Look at Afghanistan. We're trying to put our democracy on them when that was a failed experiment.
We were invited to come to Afghanistan. The only people, the country that I know that actually invaded countries on a regular basis was England.
Okay.
Because they wanted world domination.
Okay, maybe I used the wrong word. We're starting wars.
The United States has never sought to be the leaders of the world. We became a superpower and an economical power by the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors that came to this country and followed the laws and rules. And that's why the United States was blessed with a religious base by the founding fathers. And only one or two of them were Catholic. The rest of them were Protestants or nothing at all. But the problem lies in people not taking care of their own. The church in these other countries, the church in Mexico, the church in Guatemala, and all the other countries that I've mentioned already, it's up to the individuals to take care of each other. It's not the government's main responsibility.
Okay.
The church has failed in all these other countries trying to take care of their own. Now, what was the cause of that failure? It's got to be researched and it's got to be documented. Was it the economy was so bad because of corruption? Or was it because the product that they grow couldn't be exported? Was it the fact that education was not sought as an aid to help the peasant
or
better
they have
themselves?
Tyrannical dictators and people that are, getting away with literal murder. I mean, there's a lot of different things. But Dad, my question to you is, I don't agree that we should have open borders. I think we have to look at refugees, however. How do we turn them away and expect them to go back when, and again, you're citing the greatest example of it being Mary and Joseph on the back of a donkey, and yet we're going to change the tune when it comes to anybody else coming into our country. So I'm just wondering huh?
We didn't change the tune.
I'm talking about you're changing the tune when you're not letting these people flee tyranny and oppression and possible murder, but you're using an example of Jesus and Mary and Joseph doing the exact thing. And
the reason I brought that particular example up is because what the church, our Catholic faith, is doing with using Jesus and Mary and Joseph fleeing into Egypt.
But isn't that a relevant example?
Okay, that is the Christian thing to think about, helping or welcoming the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a country that has rules and regulations for doing that.
Okay.
We have an immigration process that allows us to welcome the stranger.
Okay, so
even
you're
if
not
that
saying
stranger is fleeing as a refugee.
So you're not saying don't welcome them. I'm just trying to get this straight
Hell
now.
no.
You're saying...
I'm saying doing it the right way.
Okay. What's the right way when you have 20,000, hundreds of thousands of people trying to flee into the country in a single swoop? I know a lot of this has been exaggerated, but how do we do what you're saying and still be good people, Christian or not, kindness and goodwill, as you referred to earlier? How do we do that in mass?
Okay, see, you got to remember, part of the communist or Marxist manifesto is mob rule. What the hell do you do at a border on our southern countries, Texas and Arizona and California and such? What do you do when you have such a glut of people who have been induced to come to America because through investigation and documentation and interrogation find that a lot of these caravans and mob groups of thousands of people coming north, they've been paid to come north, they've been paid to come to America for a political agenda, which would be to have more people in the country to vote a certain way against the opposition. There's even been evidence that some people in the Catholic Church have been behind getting people to come to America through these caravans. Residual effects taking place with this immigration glut coming to the southern borders, that a law-abiding country has to deal with it, but they're dealing with it with an enormous amount of numbers, enormous amount of people needing food, needing water, needing some kind of shelter, needing some kind of medical aid, are overcrowded and overflooded with a glut of humanity moving towards the United States from the southern countries.
Okay, so Dad,
now
wait.
This is got two ideas involved with it. It's done on purpose, and it's done because people are in need. There's those two things. It's done on purpose, and there are people who are in need.
Just want to be clear. What you're saying is two of these things are actually happening. There's a political movement that is paying people to come in, is what you're saying, one. And then there are actual true refugees that want to escape tyranny. Is that what you're trying to say? That those two things are happening concurrently?
From your simple-minded father's idea, yes.
Okay. That's all. I just wanted to make sure.
That's the two things that I see.
Okay.
Somebody smarter than me has probably got a lot more to add to that, but that's what I see.
Well, Dad, it doesn't mean I don't need a smarter than you person, because for one, I think you're pretty smart. But I think what's great about this is we're showing that we can have these conversations together, right? Because I learn something every time I talk to you, and I can literally say every time. Now, sometimes I don't want to fucking learn it. I wish I wouldn't have heard it. But I got to go away and think about things. And I have a mixed, as everybody tries to peg me as a liberal because I'm gay, I'm a moderate because I try to stay in the middle of everything. I have a better perspective. I can see to my left and to my right. And so I don't know, where I fall on immigration is I think everything should be done legally. However, where I get really hung up is this refugee piece, because my understanding is These are oppressive, and you're talking about everybody from the south to us. I'm talking about people across seas, that are leaving the Middle East and trying to come to us because these people are being.
They're leaving the Middle East and coming through the southern borders.
They're not coming through any other way?
No, they're coming through the southern borders. You got Haitians
Yep.
who are in the Caribbean
Okay.
who are coming through by way of Mexico to the southern borders.
Okay, I just wanted to make that distinction. One, I didn't know that they were coming through the southern borders in my own ignorance. But two, I thought I don't want our listeners to think you're only talking about Mexicans and Central Americans, because that seems like a divisive, we've got this whole thing about we've got too much of Mexico in the United States, and those are fighting words.
I'm not saying that at all. No.
Okay.
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay. So basically, if I can summarize what you're saying you believe in immigration because it's a gift the United States gives the world. You just want it done legally. On refugees, the same thing applies, right?
Exactly.
Except that you're putting more responsibility on the countries, or what you said, the churches in those countries, to take better care of their people.
The governments and the church,
Okay.
both of them have a responsibility. And Janae, that's why I'm telling you, people don't know Jesus Christ. They don't know the truth. And if these countries knew the truth and embraced the truth, their problems would be manageable. They would be addressed.
After a recent episode, my childhood best friend Gina texted me and said, "Remember the old days when your dad would go door to door to evangelize? Now he has a captive audience of many just by having a conversation with you." She goes on to say that she believes it takes a lifetime to become who we are truly meant to be, and I think she's right. I've heard my entire life Dad discussing the necessary relevance of Jesus to turn any problem around and balance the dark with the light. It used to bug me that was his only solution to anything, but now I just smile and choose to see the truth in the things he shares.
What we're dealing with in the southern borders, we don't have the manpower to make it a legal and purposeful way of immigrating to the country.
Should we just say the United States is currently closed because we don't have room, or we don't have a way to put you through our system? It's like the DMV had to shut its doors because they've got too many damn people needing a license.
Well, if there was a way that our culture could say, let's slow this down, let's put the brakes on, or however else you want to say it, let's close the borders.
Deb, what if Grandma and Grandpa, great-great-grandma and Grandpa, had to be one of those people who couldn't be accepted to Ellis Island or Philadelphia or one of the other ports because the United States was overwhelmed?
They were.
They were?
They were. And they were by not able to disembark from the ships that brought them here because the process was bottlenecking. They could not leave the ships, and that's when disease and dysentery and other things affected the people who had paid the passage from the European travel to come to the United States. They had to pay the price of even death because they wouldn't let them disembark because of the glut of people that were at Ellis Island and the other places in the northeastern part of the United States. That's facts. It's documented. It's history. You can research it.
No, I agree. I hear you. I just got something that I was disconnected on in terms of the very question I asked you about, should we close our country for a bit? Because
but how can we do that? I mean, it's like closing the borders. If the United States closed its borders and these people who are coming here from all over the globe are trying to get here, what are they going to be faced with?
That's why I asked you the question about Ellis Island and how about our ancestors.
Well, what's going on this immigration thing that's not really publicized or not really out there is there are a lot of people in the United States of America who are giving of their own resources, money, supplies, food, water, clothing, medicine, that are being shipped to our southern borders to help the people who cannot enter legally into the country.
Okay, well, thank
That's
God.
going on.
Okay, thank
That's
God.
because
That should be
that's what's
going on.
going on, but you're not hearing a lot about that.
Yeah, of course.
Because, see, that's good news. That
Mhm.
means the United States is doing something to help those who are glutting the borders so that they got some kind of care that they didn't get from where they came from, or they can't get yet because there's so many people to attend to. They've got to be vetted when they come through America. Janae, there's so much more to this that you and I can't even talk about because we don't know the actual process of
Yeah.
Mary and Joseph and Jesus being at the southern border. Who do they talk to? What do they ask? What do they have to produce? What do they have to qualify? What identification do they have? What does their medical records look like? What are they willing to contribute to
Yeah,
this
well,
known? It's
what
all that stuff that's going on that we have no idea other than what the media is feeding us. And a
Okay.
lot of it is bullshit.
So it basically, what it makes me think when you talk about that is like your own home, right? Like, in a sense, and I mean this just to make a point, the United States is like a house, like a home, right? You wouldn't let a person that couldn't show you who they were or just walked in from outside into your own home. I don't think you would. I think you'd be concerned about my mother or your children. If so, it's almost like you're also, and I don't, if I'm putting words in your mouth, let me know, but you're also sort of giving the basic human rules of, you shall not enter until you show me your hands, until you show me that you're not going to hurt what you're entering. Same reason you said our ancestors couldn't embark off the ships. They were diseased, or they didn't have enough manpower to get them through and process them correctly. So if we could look at it like that, but still this guy that's standing outside your front door might need a cup of water or some food because he's traveled, barefoot for 20 miles. That's what you're saying are all these good Samaritans that are giving money and food and resources that we're not hearing about. So if you put it in the context of an analogy for me, because that's, as you know, you're really good at those, and that's how I've learned best in my life. That's what makes sense to me, is that it's not that we don't want to help. It's that we have to be able to, we can't just let anybody in because we don't know enough about what they're bringing with them.
Well, to welcome the stranger is a responsibility that Christians have. It's part of the gospel message. And you're moved to compassion by people in need. But to use your example of a home, if someone came and I was afraid to let them in the home because of the things you stated, that would not stop me from providing the basics of food, water, some type of shelter, umbrellas, or tents, whatever. Well, I shouldn't say whatever, because I need to tell you exactly what I would do. Well, because your mom and I don't have people coming to our door and seeking refuge, we find them at the street corners, at the stop signs. Well, if you think about it before you leave the house, pack some water, some little lunch bags of food. My grandson, Nicholas, had a ministry to the homeless when he came back from working in the missions at El Salvador, because he was so touched by the poverty of what he saw that Nicholas made bags of simple nourishment, hygiene things, and water or Gatorade. He kept that in his car and he passed those things out to people on the street corners with signs.
Yeah.
He gave of his compassion by organizing something before he left the house and loaded it up in his vehicle to give to them when he encountered them.
I love that.
Matter of fact, that's what your mother wants to do. She wants to be able to help the needy that we have in our country, and we're not questioning why they're there. If someone needs help, you got to help them.
Yeah, well,
And
I appreciate you saying that, Dad, because I think a lot of people believe that people that join the narrative of immigration as we've got to be tougher or we've almost as if they're heartless. You're proving, at least in the scenario of you and Mom and your family, that that's not the case. That you can still believe immigration is a gift from the United States to the world, but also comply with the legal process that we have set up that has historically worked so far, because it's why we're all here. You have to go through that process and can still welcome the stranger, even if it means you won't let them in your house, but you'll go put a tent out in your front yard and give them food and water because they need a place to hide from the rain and the cold. That's a very different perspective than what I would assume, and this is part of the problem, is because people like me make assumptions that somebody on your side of that argument would just be like, nope, can't help you, borders closed. Well, kind of like what Trump was accused of saying, you're murderers, rapists, and diseased human beings, we're not letting you in. I think that's what's gotten skewed, is that people are making up these ideas, because I do it. I think that if I do it when evangelists, born again people, like I have such an issue with them because I always think they're up to no good. And the truth is they might be up to real good. But because I have this preconceived notion of those types of people, then I close off the potential good. And I think a lot of people on the other side of the immigration argument are doing that. That's what I'm surmising. I can't speak for anyone else but me, but I can tell you I'm doing it.
well, there's a lot of opinions floating around out there, and opinions are what they are. Everybody's got one. But when you look at the evidence that's been documented by either dissertation, written, recorded, or photographed, you can see we got a real problem at the southern border.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I'm not sure anybody would argue with that.
well, some do. And that's another thing about this whole immigration thing. It's so politically
Yeah.
booby trapped. It's hard to get like you and I talking like this with political leaders to sit down and be able to talk like this.
Yeah.
And to work out, let's look at the root cause of this. What started this? Where's the problem lie? Daily, we have to deal with what's going on in our countries and do what we can do as whatever age we are, or whatever financial situation we are, or whatever our core beliefs are. We got to do something to help one another. And these people coming from everywhere in the known world trying to get in the United States, they are of the same human race. We are God's children.
And on that note, I can surprisingly say that there's not a huge divide between me and Dad on this issue, with the exception of some of the things he cited that I have no real clue is real or not real on these political shenanigans or media sources. I really don't know what sources to believe anymore. They've all spun and twisted news to fit their agenda for ages. We're just beginning to see it now. I'm also not exactly sure how to handle the refugee piece. I still find it interesting that Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus are the poster family for the issues of refugees, yet we can't figure out how to welcome them all into the land of freedom as they flee danger. But I guess both of these things are reasons my dad reminds us that prayer is the foundation of any solution to any problem. And despite the fact that I am his moderate lesbian daughter who is proud of the person God made her to be, and though I walk a spiritual path that is not as indoctrinated or traditional as my dad's, I agree with him on this issue of prayer. Why not try connecting to the source of all things, God, the universe, and join the collective forces to put some supernatural power behind some of these issues? It's definitely not working to argue and attempt to prove who's right and who's wrong. What if the answers lie somewhere we don't look often enough? Inside of us, in that place where we are all one. Thanks again for joining us. Please remember to follow, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, because Apple Podcasts is the queen mother of making sure little unknown shows like this one can muster the power to stay alive amongst all the other chatter. I'm so happy you're here. See you next time.